this meeting of the ISD 279 Board to order, and let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll bring this special meeting to order at 7:04. Seated on my right is Director Craig, Director Douglas, Director Burgett, and Director Fortner. And I am Mike Ostafi, Board Chair. Tonight, the purpose of this meeting is to assist with the selection of the next superintendent of the Osseo area schools. And the topic tonight will be candidate presentations. There will be two presentations, each approximately 10 minutes. With a question and answer period of approximately half an hour to follow from that. We are seeking your questions from the audience. Each audience member will have been offered some note cards that you can use to write questions, as well as a presentation evaluation form. And for those of you watching online or on TV, there is an online feedback form. And for those in the audience, if you wish to use that with a device also, it may make it easier for you. Please go to the Main District website, and there is a link for the presentation feedback form, and that will allow you to fill out a survey instead of just the cards. But we encourage and appreciate any and all feedback on these presentations this evening. What we want to do, the presentations that will be coming up, the candidates received a prompt and were instructed to develop a 10-minute presentation aligned to the prompt, and that prompt is the following. In Osseo area schools, our mission is to inspire and prepare all students with the confidence, courage, and competence to achieve their dreams, contribute to community, and engage in a lifetime of learning. Please highlight your experience and education that have prepared you to be the next leader for Osseo area schools. Why are you the best choice for our next superintendent? And with that, I'll pass it over to Judy McDonald.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Ostafi, school board members, community members, and staff. I am absolutely delighted to welcome our first presenter here, Dr. Eric Pruitt from Houston, Texas.
Good evening.
Evening.
First of all, I'd like to thank the school board for inviting me back as they consider who to select as the next superintendent. Today has been very enjoyable just because I've had an opportunity to meet with district staff and learn about the principals, the teachers, and the students and the communities that make up this really attractive and enjoyable district. I want to start with this first photo, and if anything, this exemplifies what I'm all about. These students attend a school in Houston called Atherton Elementary. When I first arrived at Houston, Atherton was IR. They have a very intelligent, energetic, very veteran principal. He has over 30 years in the district and over 20 years experience as a principal. And so my relationship was very vital as far as establishing positive relationship with this principal in order to get him to have really meaningful conversations around what we need to do to significantly improve that school in 1 year. And as you see, the reason I think it's a good picture is the boys look great. They're at a event called Boys and Bow Ties, and it's just for boys. And they have presenters come and speak to these young men, and it's very positive, and it encourages students to think positive things about education and pursue their education while in HISD. Moving forward, my career has been very extensive. Starting being from Indianapolis, Indiana, I grew up with a single mom and my sister, and while in high school during my senior year, I decided to enlist in the Marine Corps and serve my country. The lessons that I learned in the Marine Corps have been invaluable and have guided me both in the classroom and leading schools, both in Chicago and in Houston. So why does all that matter? The left-hand picture shows me as a senior in high school, and during my last semester, I had an opportunity to take an independent study course. That independent study course allowed me to teach science to fourth grade students. And that was the catalyst for me loving being a teacher and loving education. From there, I went to Purdue University, and the middle picture is my student teaching class, again, another fourth grade class. And the bottom picture, from Purdue, I received my first teaching assignment with the Chicago Public Schools as a first grade teacher. I joke because I really feel sorry for those first grade students who had me straight out of the Marine Corps. But what's unique about this picture is these are sixth grade students on a trip to Purdue University at the Fountain. These students were my first grade students when I first started teaching. What happened was, during their sixth grade year, at the beginning of the school year, they had a brand new teacher who was struggling with classroom management. And the kids were taking advantage of that. And I knew they could perform much better than they were. And so I volunteered, went to my principal and said, give me the teaching assignment with those students, because their success was very important to me, because I knew they could do better. From there, from teaching at Woodlawn Community School and working with those students, I went on to become a principal. But prior to becoming a principal, I went through a program called New Leaders for New Schools. It's a national principal preparation program in multiple cities throughout the U.S. And after a year-long residency, I received my first contract in Chicago Public Schools. And in the bottom right-hand corner are some students that were at Luke O'Toole when I was principal. Very proud of them, very proud of my experiences. But why is this important? I think a solid foundation, both from being in the Marines and being in education, from being a teacher, principal resident, have prepared me to lead districts. In my current role, I'm an area superintendent with the Houston Independent School District. Over the course of 20 years, I've worked in very diverse, politically complex, financially complex districts where I was supporting excellence. Supporting excellence around improving outcomes for all kids, no matter what color, no matter what disability, no matter immigration status. My job was to improve outcomes for kids no matter what. And we were able to do that throughout, both in Chicago and in Houston. My focus through supporting excellence has always been on leadership excellence, ensuring that we have the right leaders in the right spots, ensuring that we have effective teachers in every classroom. We know the research around when kids have ineffective teachers, the impact that has on their development moving forward and matriculating through school. And then family and community empowerment. What does that mean? Engaging our families, engaging our parents, engaging the community, and making them partners in their child's education, both in the school and at home. And as we look at how we've partnered together with our families, our teachers, and school leaders, in my conversations today, we've understood that this district is doing okay, but we can do things a little bit better. As you can see, this chart identifies the percentage of kids that have met and exceeded state standards in 2017. But we see that there are significant gaps in how our African American, our Hispanic, our ELL, and our special ed students are performing compared to the district average. But what's motivating, again, through my conversations with cabinet and district personnel, is that we are keenly focused on priority work that's been established through your strategic plan. And it's really gratifying to know that every member of this team knows what the goals are, know how we're going to get there, and they're willing to do the work with the proper support. And what's great about this is we're doing great things. We're being innovative. As you can see, I've highlighted Weaver Lake, their Marble Run Mania, our aviation art contest winner. And then in the large background, we have Parker Center IB students with the United Nations trip. We're doing great things and being very innovative, but there are opportunities to extend that innovation around how we are being innovative with our teachers, being innovative with our school leaders, and being innovative around the programs that we're offering our kids. We're doing this work in Houston. It's challenging, I know, but we can do it. The innovation around our CTE programs, there are opportunities to extend how we provide industry certifications to our high school kids. There's opportunities around how we are identifying school leaders and teachers to support and retain them in the district in order to get them to build their knowledge about the communities and the students that we serve. We do this because we want to become the flagship district in the state of Minnesota. I've already heard that districts from around the state come and look to the district around how we are dealing with equity, around how we are collaborating. Why not have them come to us around how we have eliminated the achievement gap, how we are personalizing instruction through our one-to-one curriculum as we look to extend that program in the district. Also, with our program flexibility, as we look to consider how we are serving our special ed students, are there opportunities to extend those programs to ensure that every child that is receiving special ed services is being successful? Looking at how we are serving our ELL students, what are the possibilities around dual language, around immersion programs that encourage our students not only to master their native language, but master a second language? Becoming the flagship district won't be easy. And my success has been built on building relationships. I'm reading a book called Extreme Ownership. And it's written by 2 Navy SEALs, go figure. I pick a military book. And so the Extreme Ownership, the gist of this book is the sum is more important than its parts. So we have a team here that is very focused on priority goals. But in order for us to reach those goals around eliminating the achievement gap, serving all kids, as our mission says, we need to ensure we position every team member knows what their job is. How are we going to get there? And it's done through building lasting relationships that allows us to have meaningful conversations around race, around equity, around implicit and explicit bias. Those things are important because when we build solid and successful relationships, this is one of the results. Some of us want our kids to graduate from college. This picture shows my oldest daughter, India, graduating from Fisk University last year. Very proud of her. But the decision to come to this district was not made alone. I had a conversation with my wife, Kenya, of 23 years, and asked her how she felt about coming to the district. And it was a resounding, this was the right district for her and the family. Then the conversation was extended to my 16-year-old James, sophomore in high school. He has friends down in Texas. How do you feel about coming to this district? First question he asked, does it snow up there? Yes. He's used to wearing shorts all year round. But he supports the decision.
They do that here still.
He's very excited. And then the last 3, Anaya, Imani, and David, 8, 6, and 4. For those of you that have children that young, having a conversation with kids that young is very difficult, keeping them focused. And so the conversation went like this. Would you want to? Is it okay if we move to another state? Where? Minnesota. Where's that? We get a map out showing where Minnesota is. Is it cold? Sometimes. Does it snow? Yes. We can build snowmen. Yes. Yes, we want to go. And so with that, you have a family of 7 who is ready to pack up their bags and come to this district and become active members in the community. I want to thank you again for inviting me here, and I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you, the board and the district staff for their hospitality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You wanna pick where I can start asking? I'll take part. So I'm just gonna walk around and. So Dr. Pruitt, I magically already got a couple of note cards without you even seeing me go into the audience. So the first question we have for you is, could you describe a time you had to make a decision that had a significant impact on students and families, and give an example from your previous experience?
My current or previous in Chicago?
Anything that
Okay.
comes to your mind.
So whenever you have to remove a principal, it impacts kids and the school. And so one of the hardest decisions that I make in this role is when we identify a principal isn't being effective and isn't having an impact on students, and deciding either to put a plan in a process to help them further develop, and if they don't respond to that development, then removal. And so removing the principal, because I firmly believe that the principal, in addition to the teacher, is effective principals and effective teachers are vital to student success.
Okay.
Perfect.
So I'll ask your next question. Please describe a time when you brought a group of stakeholders with differing opinions together to accomplish a goal. What was the goal, and describe the process?
So in Chicago, we were dealing, when I was a deputy chief of schools, we were dealing with a serious budget deficit. We hadn't received our payments from the state, and it forced us to close 50 schools in 1 year. And so the conversation had to be with the community, parents, community members, and we held a series of community events where we were able to listen to the community and make adjustments to the schools that were initially on the list, and identify programs to support schools where kids would be going based on school closures.
Dr. Pruitt, we have 2 similar questions, so I'm going to combine them. What have been challenges you faced engaging and empowering multilingual families? How would you increase involvement of non-English parents at the district and school level? And how did you overcome the challenges that you faced?
So I'm not bilingual, and being in Houston, if I were bilingual, it would be a tremendous benefit. And so many of the schools that I support in Houston have a high multilingual population. And so how I would empower parents is by making sure that when we have meetings like this, we have interpreters or machines that interpret and provide them an opportunity to participate in the conversation and ask questions, but then also making sure that your staff represents the community that you're serving. It's vital that as we have a diverse student body, that we have people that the students and parents may relate to. It also goes back to how our schools are becoming the community hubs in their neighborhoods. And so looking to principals around how they're supporting parents through the PTO, PTA, in Houston, the PAC, and ensuring that all parents, English and non-English speaking parents, have a voice in improving outcomes for children at their school.
Okay. Some staff will have the belief that a superintendent will need their, quote, buy-in, end quote, before a change can be implemented. How would you address this belief?
So I think buy-in requires conversations. I think when most leaders make a mistake, we've identified what the challenge is. We don't engage anyone, and then we make a decision and say that we got buy-in because we informed people about the decision that we're going to make. My approach has always been, when we're presented with a challenge, we bring the people together that are going to be impacted by that challenge. An example of that, this year in Houston, when we're dealing with a budget deficit. And so we have presented a different budget model to the principals and received a lot of pushback. And so the mistake that we identified was we didn't bring them to the table to help us think through, we need X amount of dollars in order to operate for the 18-19 school year. How might we change our model in order to best meet the needs of our kids in every school? And it was through a series of workshops with our principals and central office staff that allowed us to present a model that not everyone was happy with, but the majority of principals were happy with the new budget model.
Thank you.
Dr. Pruitt, in your interview last week with regard to student behavior or misbehavior, you stated, quote, "We need to change the adults, not the kids." Would you please elaborate on that?
When we talk about behavior, there's an assumption that there's something wrong with the students. And so it's very important to me that we acknowledge that we acknowledge the strengths of every student that is that comes into our classroom, but also some of the challenges that they're experiencing. And when we have adults who may not necessarily be used to the type of behaviors being displayed in the classroom, we often fall back to blaming kids for their behavior, or blaming parents, or blaming their situation. And so I think that in order to improve discipline, we have to look at how we're preparing our teachers and our school leaders to deal with the changes that we're experiencing with our student population. Do we really understand who all of our kids are? Do we really understand what our implicit and explicit biases are related to the behaviors that we may or may not be used to? And so changing the adults means changing their paradigm around how we look at misbehavior. An example would be my son, David, a third grader. Unfortunately, he's a little bit like me. He talks too much in class. And so how he's viewed in class as a talker is very important to me, because is he talking because he's bored? Is he talking because he's not engaged? Is it just him, where he's just not following the directions of the teacher? I think that we need to make sure that we look to the student and actually look at our behaviors before we assume there's something wrong with the kids.
Can you tell us, what experience do you have in a secondary school? And I have a follow-up to that. You referenced the achievement gap. What are your action steps in regarding our equity department and helping our Black and brown students to be successful? And can you give specific examples of family empowerment and involvement where you have led these kinds of initiatives?
So I'm going to ask you to repeat that one more time. There was like first one.
Let's just begin with the first question. Yes. What experience do you have in secondary school?
So my experience as a principal and as a teacher is in K-8. In Chicago, the majority of the campuses are K-8, so I have elementary, intermediate, and middle school experience. I was a principal of a K-8 campus. When I was a deputy chief of schools in Chicago, I supported and supervised 6 high schools on the south side of Chicago. Currently in Houston, I'm over 9 high schools, 7 comprehensive, 1 online 3rd through 12th grade campus, and 1 newcomer high school.
Okay, and going on to the next one, you referenced the achievement gap. What are your action steps in regarding our equity department and helping our Black and brown students to be successful?
And so, again, the issue around equity is it's just not a Black and brown issue. If we're going to talk about equity, we have to talk about all learners and all achievement levels. My approach to addressing the achievement gap is, again, looking at having effective school leaders in every classroom, having in every school, having effective teachers in every classroom, ensuring we have high quality curriculum that's being delivered throughout the district, and ensuring that our students have access to high quality information resources throughout the school year. The issue around Black and brown kids is, again, identifying, if we know how kids are coming to us, if we know what their deficits are prior to them coming into our schools, we should have historical data around how certain students in certain schools perform when they enter in kindergarten and when they enter in 1st grade. If we know that ahead of time, there are things that this team can do in order to identify what programs, what supports for those students that we should be delivering to those campuses in order to get them on to get those students to grade level. And so that's one thing around Black and brown kids, because the assumption is if you're Black and brown, then you're not meeting and mastering. And so I think we need to change the paradigm around equity, because when if I'm selected, my kids are going to be attending schools here, and my expectation is that they are meeting and exceeding. And so what will equity look like for them? Because they're Black. And so I think the equity has to look at all students, just not our Black and brown students.
Okay, and then finally, can you give specific examples of family empowerment and involvement that you have led initiatives around?
I recently, our principal selection process is pretty extensive in Houston, and I recently had the opportunity to select a principal for one of our largest high schools on the south side of Houston. And what we decided was we have this panel that interviews the candidates that we present for candidacy to be principal. And so to empower parents, we invited our parents, we invited community members. We even asked the student council president of the high school to participate in the interview. And so that's just one example of how we try to ensure that we get the voice of the parents around what they believe the school needs in school leaders in Houston.
Thank you.
Dr. Pruitt, what do you think is the #1 thing educators need to do or have to really help students succeed?
I'm going to say the first word that came to my mind, grit. Educators, and again, education is complex. The achievement gap is complex. There's no silver bullet to solving the issues around the achievement gap. And so you need a team that has the grit in order to continue to work despite not necessarily being successful with certain initiatives, and continuing to question why something did work, and using data to inform the decision making throughout the school year. And so I think educators, especially with the challenges that we're experiencing from Florida, the hurricane, issues of safety, homelessness, the widening gap in achievement. Now, we need teachers and school leaders who have the grit to persevere despite these challenges and not use those things, color, race, economic status, as an excuse as to why we haven't eliminated the achievement gap.
Thank you. How would you go about building and maintaining trusting relationships with families, staff, community members, and the school board? And we'd like you to share a situation where you needed to rebuild the relationship after trust had been broken, and tell us how you rebuilt that trust. So how would you go about building and maintaining? Share a situation where you needed to rebuild a relationship after a trust had been broken, and how you rebuilt that trust.
So the way I go about building trust is a prime example of me arriving in Houston 4 years ago. No one knows me. And so my relationship with these new school leaders, with district staff, is vital to the student success and my success. And so I entered into that district listening, asking a lot of questions, assuming nothing, and also assuming best intentions based on the actions the individuals had taken in their individual roles. And so building trust and building relationships for me involves meeting with individuals, meeting with groups, again, asking questions, seeking to understand, not assuming bad things about what I'm being told. And with the board members, it goes back to meeting with them individually, understanding what they're passionate about, what they want to, how they see the district in the future, what I can do to support them, and then ensuring that we have constant and continuous communication throughout the school year. I was asked a question earlier, would I be willing to go to someone's house? Of course. Let me get out of central office and into a school, or anything to move the work forward is how I have approached my work in Houston and Chicago. As far as the mistrust, losing trust in someone losing trust in me.
Where you needed to rebuild a relationship after trust had been broken, how you were able to rebuild that trust.
And so I really pride myself on building relationships built on trust and transparency. And so I honestly cannot think of a situation where I've broken someone's trust and had to rebuild it, because in order for me to do the work that I've engaged in, as far as with some of the lowest performing schools and the ones that have been underserved, I can't beat around the bush. I have to be very honest with the school leaders and the principal supervisors that I work with. And so being dishonest doesn't serve the kids that we're serving. And so at this time, I just really can't think of when I've had to rebuild a relationship with someone, because I'm very honest. I'm more willing for someone to be upset with me because I'm very honest versus not being honest and then having to rebuild that relationship with a principal or supervisor or a district staff member.
Thank you.
And our last question this evening, please name one of our priority work goals and explain what you know about our current work and how you would continue to support or enhance that priority work goal.
So I'm gonna reference my materials because I haven't memorized them. And so the priority work goal around being culturally responsive through instructional strategies, I think that's vital. And really understanding what culturally responsive means is not just putting a book that looks like me in front of me. It's going a little bit deeper, understanding who our kids are and why this is meaningful, not only to them, but to the history of their city, of their state, in this nation. And so being culturally responsive, requires us to have a clear understanding of who we are as educators in order to meet the needs of the kids that we're serving.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pruitt.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. This time, I appreciate everybody filling out their forms, both here and online. If you are online, please continue to fill those out and submit the feedback forms. In just a few minutes, we will have Mr. Harris present.
need to look under evening public presentation?
Okay, while we wait to prepare for the next candidate, I just wanted to make a motion for a formal brief recess so that we could get things taken care of. So do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we are now in recess. It should be about 5 minutes or so to prepare everything. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to make a motion to reconvene this meeting of the Osseo Area School Board. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. This meeting is now reconvened, and we would like to start with our next candidate. Judy McDonald, please introduce him.
Thank you, Chair Ostafi, school board members, and community members. I am happy to introduce our second presenter for the evening, Mr. James Harris from Douglasville, Pennsylvania, Superintendent of Daniel Boone Area Schools.
Does this work? Excuse me, does this work? Yes. Okay, great. Okay. Slight problem here, getting older. Okay, well, once again, thank you for having me back again tonight. Tonight, I have 10 minutes to tell you why the district should hire me, which is awkward sometimes, but hey, I'm going to do this. Okay, so on the screen, okay, you can see what I presented. Okay, here we go. Why James Harris should be the next Osseo superintendent. I can show you better than I can tell you. I blew it up for the visually impaired like myself sometimes. Okay, first let me start off by telling you about my interests. Since you don't know who I am, I'm from Pennsylvania. Let me share a little bit about myself. On the personal note, I love the arts, sports. My favorite musical is Fame. My favorite movie is Jaws. I love the ballroom dance, salsa, and swing dance. I played the saxophone since I was in 3rd grade. I've been in different jazz bands, swing bands, blues bands. I love football, hockey, soccer, and tennis. Leadership-wise, I joined the Army when I was 18 years old. I was a military police officer for 6 years. I've been a mentor in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and I have been or am a board member of the Girl Scouts, Penn State Advisory Board, and the Ivy Tech Community College Business Advisor. Business ventures, I've owned 3 restaurants and an art gallery. The first one I did was North Main Street Annex Cafe. That's where I was discovered by a superintendent and moved into education. Noella Art Gallery. Noah is my son's name and Ella is my daughter's name. His name came first since he was born first, and Ella came last, so it's Noella. I've opened up a Taste. It's called Taste, a wine and dessert house, a wine and dessert bar. And my last restaurant was called Serendipity Bistro, which was a kind of a hybrid of all the restaurants. It was pizza, wine tasting, and craft beer. Why I should be the superintendent. My success stories. I've won awards as an entrepreneur. I have extensive startup and expansion and system turnaround experience. I've been in business for over 20 years. I've been an executive manager for 12 years. I've experienced in public and private sector, in marketing, operations, sales, finance, human resources, information technology, supply chain management, foundation development, customer service, and mergers and acquisitions. I have great presentation skills, motivation, sales, and communication skills, and I take complex problems and I make them simple and easily to understand. And I do that while staying under budget. These are my skills. I'm not going to read them off to you, but this is what I bring to the district. Some of my career highlights. I've redesigned district-wide school services, resulting in reversal of the negative 5-year financial trend, turned it to positive. I co-chaired governmental restructuring in Indiana, where we merged city and county entities. I took the 15 organizations that were in Indiana, nonprofit, for-profit, county, and city. We merged them and created one collaborative purchasing organization. I've done 4 startup businesses, 3 restaurants and an art gallery, and I also won Educator of the Year in Ohio for my work with inner city youth teaching statistics in partnership with the NBA Cares. Why should I be your next superintendent? What is my education? Let's find out. I went to Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey, Big East. I got my MBA from Rosemont College in Rosemont, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia, near St. Joe's, Villanova, Drexel, that whole mainline area. I got my alternative superintendent's license from University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio. I've also been commissioned as a superintendent in Pennsylvania, and I'm currently getting my PhD in organizational leadership from Alvernia University. And that just changed last week. I'm getting it now in education leadership. My teaching experience. I began teaching at the University of Evansville School of Business. I taught undergrad and graduate courses, and currently I teach at Holy Family University in Philadelphia. I teach in our Department of Education, just our graduate program. I teach future principals, and my first cohort just finished. So someone who's never a principal teaches principal leadership courses. Go figure that. My government experience, I was a United States Army military police officer, and I joined the New Jersey Treasury Department Division of Taxation as an investigator, my first job out of college. Moved into business. I was an analyst for Coca-Cola Bottling Company, Bristol Myers Squibb, and GlaxoSmithKline. School administration experience. I spent my first entry-level job was chief operating officer. I moved on to another school district, became COO. I wanted to get school-based experience, so when I moved into Cleveland school system, well, charter schools in Cleveland, I became associate head of school. Then I became director of operations and student support in Massachusetts, heading up the New England region. And then I went to Philadelphia School District. I became executive director of facilities and operations. And from there, I was recruited to become superintendent where I am now. Now let's look at what I can bring to ASIO. I bring a fresh approach. I am what is called in education someone who doesn't have the background. I'm unique. I'm one of the few superintendents in the entire state of Pennsylvania who's never taught a K-12 class. So what I bring is an outsider's approach. People fall into mental ruts, and I find this in education a lot. We all do it. Someone who only has education experience is not going to question or reconsider processes, decisions, methods, or strategies as easily as I will. The best question an employee can ask is, why do we do things that way? I ask that all day long, because that question invites a conversation that desperately needs to happen. Will you get that level of inquiry from someone whose professional self-esteem and ego reside in the notion that they already know what things are supposed to work? I'm an experienced learner. I learn every day by working with teachers, principals, and the public. I'm also a parent, and my children go to the school districts where I work. I have outside experience. I am forced every day to learn something new because I don't know everything. I don't come here with a plan. I have an objective. So I take the best practices that I've learned from all around, all facets of where I've worked, and I bring them here. Once again, I don't have a plan. I have an objective. People who have performed the same or similar jobs over and over again become calcified into traditional methods. Cookie-cutter candidates are the worst folks to hire if you want someone to rethink or reimagine a function. I'm not here to reinvent the wheel, but I will take a fresh approach to how things are done. I'm not here to change things. This is a fantastic school district, by far the best I've ever been a part of for this amount of time. I've worked in the worst of the worst, and this is one of the best of the best. And when I was interviewing with the cabinet, I told them that, because they were a little, well, we have to get over this hurdle or that hurdle. I said, look, I will take you someplace else and show you those are hurdles. You have opportunities here, and there are great opportunities and great people. Diversity. I'm non-traditional. That's what it says on all the forms I fill out, because I did not check that box 27 years ago when I began my undergrad as an education major. I was a behavioral science major. I studied cultural anthropology. I studied why groups do things. And I brought that into business. Companies hired me to sell their products to the public. I used statistics and data analysis. that's what I bring now to schools. And once again, I'm an education underdog. People always put me down because I did not major in education 27 years ago. But for the last 10 years, I've been an educator. And like my home team, the Eagles, we were underdogs. And look what happened. I had to throw that in there. So I'll be happy to take any questions from you. And here I am.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. So I have a couple of questions already set to go. Please describe a time when you brought a group of stakeholders with differing opinions together to accomplish a goal. What was the goal, and describe the process?
Well, when I first got involved in working for schools, I didn't know what I was doing at all. The superintendent brought me in because he liked the way my restaurants ran. And I was in charge of all of the non-academic areas. So my first duty was to purchase copy paper. I needed to buy 15,000 cases of copy paper, and I had no idea how to do it. At the time, we warehoused everything. So semis would pull up, they would drop the pallets off, and they would go about their business. So I walked across our courtyard and went to the city purchasing department and said, hey, you buy paper, we buy paper, let's do it together. And they threw me out. So I researched best practices on how to do it. I contacted the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District, and they seemed to have a great process in line. And they worked with me for about a week. And in doing that, I reached out to county groups, charter schools, parochial schools, the airport, the zoo, everyone. So let's work together, lead the city out. And they agreed. And in about 3 months later, we saved, as a group, about 25% off our general fund. The mayor of the city found out, called my boss and said, hey, why aren't we doing this? And he said, you threw Jim out about 3 months ago. He said, well, tell Jim to come back. From that, in about 2 months, I took over city purchasing. And it was a collaborative of the city, county, and school district. And the school district ran purchasing for all the organizations. So bringing all those groups together. And in bringing them together, it brought people to the table that wouldn't normally talk to each other. So the airport authority said, hey, do you have an aviation program in your schools? And we said, no. He said, do you want one? The zoo director said, do you have a zoological program in your schools? We said, no. He goes, do you want one? So just opening those doors through purchasing allowed other opportunities to happen. So that's what I was known for in Indiana, is bringing all these groups together. And I reported to the city, county, and school boards, because no one wanted to give up authority, but it worked. So that's probably one of my biggest successes, working with all those groups and bringing them together.
Mr. Harris, would you please describe a time you had to make a decision that had a significant impact on students and families? Please give an example from your previous experience.
Well, what I'm doing now as superintendent, I had to close I recommended closing a school, an elementary school. And before I got there, about a year before, the district had tried to close it, but there was parental opposition, and it did not get closed. However, I come in, I have a fresh approach, and I put together a plan on how to phase this school out without one person complaining. Basically, what I did was, in working with the board and community, I stopped putting students into the school. And in 3 years, that school now has no students in it. So there was no one to complain. Students found other schools to go to. They were happy, they were comfortable, and we phased it out. That building's now going to be the new administration building once it's remodeled, but it was a smooth approach. We held a number of community meetings, informed parents, informed the community, and at first people were upset. But once they realized that they weren't being ripped out of their school and transported somewhere else, they were going to be allowed to finish in that location. And this year we're celebrating the closing of that school. It worked. So something that the district tried to do years before, where it was oppositional, I found a way to phase it in over a number of years, and not one person came to the hearing to complain. The media was there, the news crews were there, and I said, what are you here for? Nobody's here to complain. And he said, yeah, I noticed that. How did you close the school and no one's complaining? I said, we phased it in. We gave parents choice. We gave students opportunities, and the principals and the district all supported that. So something that could have been controversial went smoothly, and it was kind of a no big deal. We closed it, or we're closing it this year, at the end of this year, and it went smoothly.
Okay, so Mr. Harris, we have a number of schools that have been identified as racially isolated. Does this concern you, and how would you support these schools?
Racially isolated how? Meaning the number of students who go to that school are one ethnic group?
Correct.
Well, diversity is a plus. When I was researching this district, one of the reasons why, when I was approached to apply, my daughter's in 6th grade, my son's a junior. My son's graduating next year, he's gonna stay where he is. However, this is a district where I thought, wow, my daughter would benefit from the diversity in this district. I see it as a plus, not as a negative. In those buildings that are skewed one way or the other ethnically, race isn't a problem. It's the work that goes behind supporting that group academically is what's needed. So if a certain ethnic group chooses to go to a certain school, that's fine. But academically, they have to be successful. Now, if certain criteria are not met to support that group, that's a huge problem. And we need to shift resources accordingly. That's how I do it in my district. We always have limited funds, but we have to be able to be nimble enough to move funds to where support is needed. And if people choose to go to school in their community or certain schools, that should be done. But we also should have the option sometimes, if they want to go someplace else, if that school is not performing, possibly to go there also. It's all really situational to me, but I think if supports are needed, things could be shifted. And equity means not everyone gets 5 reading specialists. One school may get 8, one school may get 2. All depends on the need.
Thank you.
Mr. Harris, oftentimes when discussions arise around Black and brown students' student achievement, the Asian narrative is missing because there is an assumption that Asian students are all doing well, which is not the case. What will you do to ensure discussions around the achievement gap is inclusive of all groups?
Once again, I grew up in New Jersey, where we were multicultural, multi-background, different religions. We looked at people as just based on their personality. I know that's not how the real or other parts of the world work. The students, once again, we can't work off of assumptions. I always say I don't use my gut, I use data. And that's all I use. And I know behind the data there are real people that are tied to those numbers. So when working with data to look at which groups are performing or underperforming, it doesn't matter where your grandparents or your great-grandparents came from. If you're not performing where you think you should be, then we're going to offer you the support that's needed.
Thank you.
So Mr. Harris, as the new OSSEO superintendent, what steps will you take to connect to the educational support professionals in our district? And what impact or role do you believe they have on student achievement?
Well, they know better than I do what the students need. And one of the things I do in my current district is I listen to people. I just don't tell them what to do. I said earlier when the board was interviewing me, when I was 19, 20, I thought in 20 or 30 years when I become the boss, I could tell people what to do and they'll listen. I realize now, 27 years later, that's not the case. I have to get more feedback and listen more than what I talk. So in talking to the support specialists, I have to hear what they need. And as I said earlier, we have one position available that I can add this year. And every department that I work with approach me with a legitimate reason why they need that body. And that body is now going to special ed because they need, the greatest return on investment will go to that department for support because that's where we need it the most. Now, other areas are also in need. But when you have limited resources, you have to go where the need is the greatest. And we always look at how we can impact the classroom, the students, and we all agreed that that's where it should go. So listening to the support specialists, because they're on the ground with the students, face-to-face, every day. I need to hear from them what they need, and it's my job to give them the supports that they need to be successful.
Thank you.
Mr. Harris, what do you believe are the most integral components of staff development and curriculum implementation in order to move our priority work forward?
Say that question one more time, I'm sorry.
What do you believe are the most integral components of staff development and curriculum implementation in order to move our priority work forward?
Well, staff has to agree. When in my district, we do curriculum writing with the teachers. Next year, we're going one-to-one with iPads. We spent the whole year letting the teachers play around with it and learn. It's unfair to give someone a tool and not train them and show them how to use that tool for their classroom. So we took a step back. We weren't so aggressive. And developing that curriculum in my district, we sometimes, and I'm sure most of you lag behind curriculum. It falls behind. So we have to put together a plan, a timeline, a reasonable timeline, and stick to that when you're writing curriculum and tying it in to what you're doing. This district, for one, I met with the IT director, has great resources, but are they being used appropriately? I'm sure they could be used better. So hearing from the staff, getting their feedback, and not just living in this building, going out to the schools and talking to the students and talking to the teachers and the support staff in those buildings, how it could be done better, and then developing a plan around that. And not just being stagnant, actually having an ongoing plan for professional development. And professional development should be tied to what the staff needs to learn, not just what the state compels you to do every year.
Thank you.
So please provide a specific example in a school district environment of a complex situation and your problem solving of the situation.
Well, once again, I'll go back to the school closure. It was something that a principal came to me with about our lines of enrollment. And he was questioning why these students on one side of the street go to one school and the other live on the other. Basically, we were creating a poor school and a wealthier school. So in trying to reconfigure this, we came to the same conclusion that came up years ago. We need to close this school. But how do we do it? Because everyone I worked with was familiar with the turmoil that it caused before. And this is my first year as superintendent. I'm walking in going, okay, let's close the school. And let's outsource custodial. Let's outsource custodial and maintenance. It wouldn't work. But tactically, we brought in our consumers. We went out to the families. We went out to the schools. We showed them where the students would be going. We let siblings go together, tour schools, go together if you like, join your sibling. We looked at bus routing, we looked at neighborhoods, we looked at everything to be as least disruptive as possible. And in the end, people were like, okay, let's do it. And I was getting calls on this one issue saying, hey, thank you. The school where my child is going to now is fantastic. It's great. We were a little concerned at first, but it's working. I said, well, thanks. And I don't get many friendly calls as a superintendent, but it was nice that people were saying, hey, you know, this actually works. It's a good thing. So something that could have been terrible if I just put the hammer down and said we're going to do this and fought, didn't occur.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. This next question is about your experience with non-English speakers. Would you please describe your experience with non-English speakers and describe how you would increase their involvement in district-level committees and empower them?
Well, when I worked in Massachusetts, I worked under a state-issued takeover of a school district. And the school was probably 99.9% Spanish-speaking. My Spanish is tiny. I had the greatest conversations with kids I thought could speak English, but couldn't. In looking at the resources that that school had, the office staff didn't speak Spanish when I got there. I said, well, how can you even communicate with the parents? So I replaced the office staff with 2 ladies who could speak Spanish, who were from the community. Then I started picking up a little Spanish here and there, and we hired staff who could speak Spanish. That made the parents feel welcome because they could come into the school and talk to someone. Before that, they couldn't. They used their children to interpret for them. And the kids sometimes wouldn't say everything that we were saying. We also hired a community engagement specialist, 2 of them, who were bilingual, who lived in the community. I ended up moving into the community. So the kids would see me at the barbershops on Saturday. They would see me at the bakery. They would see me just getting gas. And the parents got comfortable with me. And then the community specialist. And the school, everyone walked. So we just all kind of lived in the neighborhood. That made the parents feel, okay, these people here are coming in, are now vested in us. Well, let's come in. And we started doing parent engagement days where the parents would come in and help decorate the school. Had nothing to do with academics. But we would have parties and they would decorate the halls. They would come in and monitor classrooms and do various things. Talent shows. Nothing to do with academics. Nothing to do with owing money. So we engaged the parents on a way that they felt they could contribute, that didn't cost them anything. They were with people that they could speak with, and they had these little groups where the parents, uncles, grandparents, felt comfortable now coming to the school. That's a real community school. And that school has been turned around. It took 3 years, but now that school is now doing positive academic work.
So speaking of moving from negative to positive, share a specific example of how you reversed negative to positive in your reference to your work with schools.
Okay, when I went to Dayton Public Schools, its food service department was losing $1 million a year. Coming from the restaurant background that I have, it would be amazing if I knew how many people are going to come through my restaurant door every day. I could serve them 1 of 3 items, and I know what they would pay. That's a restaurant or a business person's dream. That's a school district. So in looking at our numbers, I brought in a few restaurateurs that I was familiar with. I said, just take a look and tell me what you see. They said, 1, you're overstaffed, because they saw one gentleman at lunchtime at a high school filling little souffle cups with melted cheese for 45 minutes. And the gentleman walked over, the chef walked over and said, what's your job? He goes, I fill these cups every day. He goes, that's my job. He turned, he goes, Jim, you're overstaffed. We looked at the items that they were preparing. They would prepare on average 6 items for lunch. And they had their own catering business on the side. We stopped that. We narrowed it down to 1 lunch item, no more catering, and we had special dietary meals, a salad, and a sandwich. And that was it. And the kids loved it. And we focused on making those meals tastier. I knew what the budget was at the end of the year. So I wrote that number on the right page of an Excel sheet, and I divided that by 10 months. Then I divided that by 4 weeks. That was our weekly total that we had to get to. So I looked at the sales totals every day, totaled them to a week. I know what the estimate should have been. I know what the actual was. Anytime there was a difference, we could correct it within 24 hours. Because those organizations like that, they're like ocean liners. You can't just make a U-turn and turn them around. I needed to make it nimble. And by looking at our sales data daily, it could be corrected. So the moment we were off, because I checked the enrollment in school that day, the attendance. If we had 700 students and 90% of them purchased meals, I know what that number should be. If it was off, let's go check. Turns out they weren't checking or counting all the meals. That's like giving away free food. That's why they were losing money also. So we put these measures in place. I also trained each kitchen manager basic accounting skills because they didn't know how they were being measured. So teaching them basic accounting skills, they became experts in owning their area. We were on track in 3 months. We turned a profit of $300,000. We corrected the problem. So that's my negative to positive.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harris, other districts offer immersion language programs to their schools. What is your opinion on immersion programs, and are you willing to implement such programs in our district?
I think that any program that the community wants. I added Mandarin Chinese to my district, and I partnered with couple other school districts to bring it in. I think it's fantastic. Anything that we can do that will benefit the students, encourage them, challenge them, something a little bit different should be done.
All right, thank you. This next question STEM is, if it is correct that you are presently superintendent for a school district that is comprised of 1 senior high, 1 junior high, and 3 elementary schools, how can you convince us that you are able to lead a district of 31 sites?
My first district had 22,000 students in it. It looked just like this one in Evansville, Indiana. That's where I started. And then I went to Dayton, Ohio, where they had 13,000 students. Then I started building charter schools. Then I went to a district that was in state distress. Then I went to Philadelphia Public Schools. It's just huge. I think it's number 9 in the country. And from that, a district called me out and said, we want an alternative approach. Get us in line. And that's where I am now. For me, it's not about the size of the district. It's about the resources and the effort and dedication you're willing to put in support of the students and the staff within the district. So in Philadelphia, they are working really hard to turn around a lot of areas that have been neglected for years. They're just huge. I mean, Philadelphia is so huge, it's amazing. When I was brought to my district, I was like, this is small, but I got to know the students. I got to know the teachers. I got to know the families. My family is one of the families. And I can't hide in my district. I'm told I'm in the schools more than any other superintendent's ever been there before. Because when I get bored in my office, I like going out and talking to the teachers. I like talking to the students, talking to the athletic director, what's going on. I like going to the volleyball games. I like going to the track meets, although we're not having any because there's snow everywhere and no baseball. But I like going to the events. My wife and I try to do things at the district with our children. We go separately because we can't be there all together. But coming to this district, size-wise, it's not a threat to me. I'm amazed at all the supports you have. I'm going to go back to my district and go, why can't we get some of these things? Because you are truly special with all these supports and the staff that you have here. You really are. So one, I'm not threatened by the size of it. It's a challenge, of course. That's why one of the reasons why I'm here. I feel I can contribute something, but this is not out of the realm of what I'm used to working with.
Okay, I hold in my hand the last question of the evening. Mr. Harris, how would the teachers in your current district describe you?
I try not to be disruptive in their classes. I love kids. I read Dr. Seuss all the time. So they would describe me as kind of standoffish. I don't like to go into their classrooms. And now all of our classroom doors are locked because of security reasons. So I have to go knock on a door, use a key to get in. And it's disruptive and it throws them off their pace for their class. I do pop into lunches and gym classes, music classes, art, things like that. But if I see someone teaching a math lesson, I kind of peek through the door and I'll see them in the hallway or at events and I talk to them, like musicals and plays. My staff, principals and things, I pop in all the time just to chat. We do building walkthroughs, unofficial, just to get the feel of the building. I wish I could be more involved in the classrooms, but when I come in, everything kind of stops. And I know when I taught a few classes, you get the kids into what you're doing, and then someone walks in and it all shuts down. I kind of amp them up a little bit. And then I walk out and say, okay, go back and teach. And the teacher's like, oh, give me a break. This guy comes into class. So I try not to barge in so often. But I pop into my daughter's class from time to time. I give my son, who's 17 with a beard, a hug every so often when I see him in the hallway, which he hates. But yeah, so I'm connected, but I try to be respectful of their profession and what they're trying to do. And I know it's hard, and for someone to keep barging in, it's disruptive. So, for the executive staff, I'm always available, I'm always there. I work 24 hours a day. I live in the district. I live about 300 yards from my office, so always available. I would think that
Okay.
would be the main thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So I would like everybody to fill out the forms and start writing that feedback. If you're online, please use that and submit that very quickly. We are going to take a short recess. Not that short, but we'll take a recess while we wait to compile all the information that you provided us that is coming in from online, and take a look at the other feedback from the rest of the day. And we expect to come back around 9:15 to 9:30. So with that, I would like to make a motion to recess this meeting to approximately 9:15 or so. And is there a second? Second by Director Fortner. All in favor? Aye. We are recessed till approximately 9:15 or so. Thank you. Well, I'll entertain a motion to reconvene this meeting of the special meeting of the Osseo Area School Board.
Second.
No, I will entertain a motion.
Oh.
Anyone? All right, let's just say it this way. I will make a motion to reconvene the meeting of the school board meeting of the Osseo Area School Board. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Craig. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes 5-0. This meeting is now reconvened at 10:30. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who's still here. I would like to thank everybody who's still watching. I would like to thank everyone who participated today with the feedback, with the questions, with interviewing the candidates, having lunch with the candidates, and going through that process. Many of you took a lot of time to do that, and it's very important. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate the voluminous amounts of feedback that we've received. We have spent a lot of time today and received a lot of feedback from the presentations and from the interviews. And I believe it will serve the individual board members well to take additional time to consider all of the info that has been presented. In anticipation of that need, we have previously scheduled a meeting for tomorrow at 6 p.m. In the ESC, a public meeting that has been previously scheduled. I would now entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting so that the individual board members can continue to review and consider the substantial community feedback and their impressions of today's interviews and presentations prior to tomorrow's scheduled meeting. So moved, okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Director Douglas. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. We are adjourned until tomorrow at 6 p.m. where we will start the next meeting. Thank you.